Welcome to another episode of Behind the Shield. I'm your host, Gary Damer, and today I have Logan Harris, the CEO of Spotter Global. Logan, welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. I want to say really first off, most of the time we on this show we talk about cloud, cybersecurity, compliance, and mission systems. But today we're going to go kind of outside the data center and we're going to talk about the perimeter, and that's the physical perimeter. And if at all possible, maybe Logan, you could introduce who you are and then the origin story really behind your company as well.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on. And like Gary was saying, we're a little bit different from I think your typical content, in the sense that we're very much focused on the physical security, and now that's applicable to lots of different situations, and where we kind of got into this, where I got into this in the very beginning, it started in after 9/11. So back in 2001, I was working for a company. I was the chief technology officer for this company that was making small radars for monitoring traffic on freeways and highways. And there's these, you'll probably see them around, these little white boxes up on the side of a pole looking across a freeway, and they're, counting cars, measuring the velocity, things like that. After 9/11 happened, we looked at these broad area announcements that went out. They were looking for different ways to, how can we provide, better security for, or better defense for the U.S. And myself and one of the other RF engineers were, collaborating, and we're thinking, what can we do with that? And we came up with an idea to make a very small imaging radar that would fly on a drone. Now, this is back in 2001. Okay, so drones weren't like as ubiquitous as they are now.
Right.
And so we formed another company to go do this, and we licensed the technology that we had developed at this other traffic radar company. We licensed what we had done, and to apply it to this different problem set, to say, okay, we can fly a radar on this drone. It was the Boeing Scan Eagle. You might have seen it out of the Captain Phillips movie. It's used by the Marines. It's used all over the place now, kind of for these military applications for surveillance. Now they wanted something that they could see through the fog and the dust and that type of thing, nighttime. And that's where radar comes in, because it can do that. It can see through fog and rain and dust. It's really good for that. So we built the first like 2-pound synthetic aperture radar, and the first kind of on that same class. To put you in perspective, other of those kind of similar type functionality were several hundred pounds. So we went from hundreds of pounds down to 2 pounds, and that kind of got us into the kind of the military market. So while we were doing this, the conflict in Afghanistan and Iraq was happening, and continuing to happen. And they had a particular mission where the Special Forces, SEALs, and Army Rangers were going out to these villages to do what they call village stability operations. And I'll share a picture with you on this. It's a little bit small, but it's showing this outpost. I've got a little red circle around there. And what they needed to do is they were going out to these small villages, setting up in a small outpost like this, which has just a very small perimeter. It was a small group of special forces, and they needed to have situational awareness. They needed to know when attacks were coming. And so they saw what we were doing with this 2-pound imaging radar and said, well, why can't you make a 1 or 2 pound motion, ground surveillance radar? And they
Stationary,
yeah,
I'm sure.
yeah,
Right.
stationary, sit it up
Yep.
on a tripod or on a side of the building. And so this guy from DARPA came to talk to us, and it was really funny. I got an email from an AOL account saying all these technical questions, and I'm like, who is this? It sounds like some, guy, trying to do espionage, right? But
Right,
anyway, he
right.
was legit. He was worked for DARPA. He just liked to keep his AOL account. Um, and so they got us a little bit of money, and then we converted our imaging radar that was going on drones to be on the ground and looking for people and vehicles over wide areas. Our first one we shipped back in 2000, beginning of 2011. So I formed Spotter as a separate company, spun out of the airborne radar company, which is still going strong, and now focused on the ground and looking for ground targets, from these small radar systems. And our first one went out in 2011, and it could track a person at 1,000 meters. So, 1,000 yards away, so over 3,000, feet away, it could put a, precise GPS coordinate on anything that's moving out there, and then we cue cameras onto target, and then they can, basically do something about it. So that's how we got started, as a separate company. We did get an initial investment from Incatel, where they're a CIA-backed venture capitalist firm, because they needed also some like this type of technology. And then we were doing that for a number of years, and there was another major event against electrical utilities in 2013, where I'm not sure if you remember this, but in 2013 there was an attack against the substation called Metcalf, and a couple of guys with AK-47s shot up transformers
Oh
at
yeah.
this critical infrastructure, critical site, and took it offline, caused like $20 million of damage in a few minutes. They never got any sight of them because they were like 200 meters away from the fence line, just shooting into the transformer, and that kind of galvanized the whole industry. And it also, the Wall Street Journal published a full, headline article about it. And then, at the time they also mentioned that there was a study that said, okay, if you take down 9 of these critical substations, and there's like 400 of them spread across the United States, if you take down 9 simultaneously, the whole grid of the United States will have a cascade failure and go offline.
Hmm.
And that kind of drove our next pivot into critical infrastructure. So now we're protecting these critical substations, but now we're at data centers, we're at drop yards, we're at airports, military bases. We're even up on the Arctic Circle, looking for polar bears. So that's kind of drove our, outside of our military, which we still do. That kind of drove our adoption into these other areas.
So civil sectors and critical infrastructure protection, stuff like that. Yeah, I'm an electrical engineer, and it just fascinates me is, what were the challenges, to be able to get those systems from being as large as they were to that small to be able to fit on top of tripods or to be able to fly on the drones. I mean, that to me is just fascinating. So, if you wouldn't mind geeking out a little bit on
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
on that piece of it, because that just fascinates me.
Yeah, I mean, we took a whole different approach. Things were changing in terms of, if you think about 2001, Wi-Fi was
Hmm.
becoming a thing, right?
Yep.
Before that, and so DSPs, with your cell phones, there there was a lot of capability that was coming both in the wireless chipsets as well as the
Mm.
digital signal processors driven by the cell phone market in 2001, and we took advantage of that. That's combined with kind of a different way of generating the waveforms. We use something called frequency modulated continuous wave, FMCW. The big radars in the past, primarily, there was still some of these FMCW radars, but they were really made to track aircraft at 200 kilometers away, right? And they're
Hmm.
huge, and they didn't use the typical type, kind of like a solid state amplifier. They were using still vacuum tubes and magnetrons and, things like that, big pieces of metal with lots of power, right?
That's how I remember it. I used to work back in the day where we integrated radars into common operating pictures to be able to give visibility of drug traffickers. That's really what I worked a lot on in the very beginning stages of my career, where we took some of those really like over the horizon radars, but they were huge. I mean,
Yeah.
they sit on top of towers. So that's where my understanding of radars coming in. But I guess now, I mean, they're using those same kind of radars in self-driving cars and that kind of stuff as well. So all that's shrinking down smaller and smaller. So do you actually do you take that information from these kind of smaller platforms and then integrate with any kind of common operating picture as well?
Yes. Yes, we've used kind of like these technologies, solid state, transmitters,
Hmm.
frequency generators, that are very now miniaturized, which was really driven by the cell
Yeah,
phone
yeah,
and
yeah. I don't even
wireless.
know why. I don't even know why I didn't even think of that. Because
Yeah.
yeah, right here in the power of our hands is everything you ever needed, right?
Yeah, and that drove that. So we use those components and a different approach
Hmm.
to now say, okay, we're developing a radar that's probably well, not probably, it is more similar to a radio than like the radars of the past.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so we came from that perspective. And since our targets, were 1,000 meters, not 200 kilometers,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right.
we could do things differently, and we did
Hmm.
do things differently.
Yeah, you're looking
And
for the immediate response as opposed to I'm looking at somebody from over the horizon, or even on some of the ships that we worked with. They were still looking fairly long distance. There wasn't like up close and personal.
exactly.
So
And so you need to, depending on what the problem is they're trying to solve, you need to kind of scale the technology to that problem. And so you think about it,
right,
you got a
right.
small group with limited resources. They got to drop in. They might be parachuting out of an
Yep.
airplane.
Hmm.
They can't carry
Hmm.
a couple 100-pound radar in their back. You need something small, but they
And
also need
and
capability.
they're, and they're not interested in what's going on in the next county. They're interested in what's going on over the next hill.
Yeah,
Right.
like I'm looking at the guy who's shooting at me, so I need to
Right.
know,
Hmm.
a number of hundreds of meters away what's happening, and that's what we did.
Yeah. So I guess the power consumption is still like a cell phone kind of. If you think about it from like a cell phone perspective, it's the same kind or similar kind of power consumption there as well.
Oh yeah,
Right.
power levels. In fact, like the radar that's sitting here behind me
Hmm.
is our new compact holographic 3D radar that was specifically made to pick up these small FPV drones or fiber optic drones
Yep. Hmm.
like this like like these right here. This is kind of like the new threat is these drones that have a
So
fiber optic cable attached to
yeah,
them.
how big are those? I mean, are they 12 inches or are they 36 inches?
Yeah, they're
Because there's a big
small.
difference.
So you're looking,
Okay.
yeah, they're kind of like 12 inches from side to side, and they
Right.
carry
Hmm.
a few, like probably 4 to 5 pounds of payload. So they're carrying like some C4 or, maybe even I've seen them carrying like the RPG, munition. They just put that on
Hmm.
on it and run it into all kinds of things. So, but there's these are this is kind of like the new threat. I mean, obviously there are commercial off the shelf drones that are being used in lots of different ways that they
Right.
shouldn't be and go into areas where they shouldn't. Um, you know, again, the electrical substations. They've put up walls. We've got ground radars looking. We got cameras. We got fences. But okay, that goes up. Maybe 12 feet.
Hmm.
Everything above 12 feet is wide open. Um,
Hmm.
and anyone now has an aircraft that has a few $100s can go buy a drone. And what's crazy about this is that this has no emissions. There's no, those no RF sensors that can pick up these type of fiber optic guided drones because they're flying by wire. It's just a
Right.
communication across that fiber optic cable, and they can go hundreds of kilometers, um, and and you can buy it off of Alibaba for a few $100s. This is
Right.
Alibaba just did a look for fiber optic drone kits here, and you can see I got lots of different options here where I can just buy a
I
kit.
mean, you see in some of these cities in Ukraine, they're covered with it, right? They're just
Yeah,
covered with fiber optic cables. It looks like big, large spider webs, you know?
yeah. It's looked like the whole forest has had the spiders crawling
Yeah.
all over it,
Right.
and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's now it's proliferating outside of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Um, we're hearing that there's attacks of these being used in Colombia, in Israel. I'm sure there's other places as well. So, I mean, the fact that you can go and just buy this, you know, just
So,
off the web
right.
is kind of crazy.
I mean, so are these critical infrastructure companies kind of planning for the visibility side of this? Because I mean, what I see is a complete nightmare, right? Um, you have all these substations, or you have power, nuclear power plants, or anything like that. That you could fire drones off from any angle, to detonate, a munition over top of it or in it. You know, how do they get that visibility? Is that something your company does? The visibility piece of it, is that the main piece of the output of what you guys do?
Yes, I mean, we work with countermeasures companies to do mitigation as well.
That was my
But
next question.
yeah, so let me share something
Yep.
like a real example. So we've got a number of different sensors. These small radars that are made for tracking these drones. We also have what we call a remote drone ID sensor that picks up the broadcast of the commercial off-the-shelf drones.
Hmm.
So it depends on your kind of your layer of risk that you want to deal
Hmm.
with. The remote drone ID is much less expensive. It covers a bigger area. So like here's a real system. It's mounted uh, on our on our office here at this location in Orem, Utah, and so we're just kind of in a business park by kind of a suburban area. And what I'm showing here is a top-down view, a map view of drone activity in the last 2 weeks.
Hmm.
And let me put some more up here so we can see we've gotten quite a few of these in the area. We've got about 65 different flights. Uh, we've had aircraft, of course. We're
Hmm.
tracking we're tracking aircraft. So ADSB is a protocol that the aircraft transmits their location and hull number. So we're tracking that information as well as we are tracking the drones. And with the remote ID, we can see the location of the drone. So like I'm going to take a look at this one right here. Uh, we can see that here's the operator. Uh, we can tell you where the operator is. We can see where the drone was. And we also, this big long number there is the serial number. So that's really helpful for investigation, but not only just for forensics, but now you have this live data where you can even just click right here on get directions, and that's going to tell you okay how to get to that operator, so you can pass it off to the security guards or to the police.
So, I mean, that's a kind of somewhat new FAA rule, right? That makes
Yes.
drone operators kind of report where they're not only where they're planning on flying it, but where they're actually launching it from as well.
Yeah, I
I,
mean
kn- I
it,
know
it tells
I know
you.
there's been some challenges to that in the recent past as well. I'm not sure where it's at recently. I have a small drone myself, and I fly it quite often.
And
But my drone is under the limit,
oh,
under the weight limit,
the
so I don't have
250
to.
grams, yeah.
Yes, yes, yeah. So I don't have to register it, or I don't have to get a license for it either.
Hmm.
Um, but there are, so is this mostly looking at those kind of drones, 250 and above, and the ability to follow the new FAA rules, or is there something else that can help you determine, where they're launching from?
Yeah, so with this one, so yeah, you're correct. If they're in the United States right now, the regulation is that if they're 250 grams or larger, they have to broadcast the signal, and
Hmm.
it's like a license plate in a
Yep.
way.
Hmm.
And so, first responders, the police, or even security guards or whomever, this is open. Anybody can pick this up. So
Yep.
it's not like you have to have a special license to get this. You just have to have the equipment. There's even apps that will work on your cell phone, very limited range, and they
Hmm.
don't work with everything. But there's an app that you can put on your cell phone. You can potentially pick up that serial number and see where the operator is. So it's just
Right.
a broadcast, right? And so this is kind of like the first step of providing some level of situational awareness is this remote ID. And
Okay.
it's a small sensor, that you can put up, up on a roof or on a pole, and it covers up to 3 kilometers. So we're talking a pretty big area of coverage uh, with just one of these sensors. Uh,
Right.
think a 3 kilometer radius, 6 kilometer bubble. Uh, that's a lot of space, and so we see a lot of our, both our critical infrastructure, but even military bases putting this type of technology in, so that they can see kind of what we call the careless, the clueless, and kind of like the low end criminal.
Hmm. 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 Yeah. I'm not gonna lie to you. You're scaring me a little bit here. I really hadn't even thought about this because I was arguing against, the FAA rule, for knowing where people are when they take off because there are some people who just don't like drones, right? And they can track you down and come give you a hard time about flying when you're legal doing everything you're doing. But I understand that challenge now, and yeah, I think it's something that we definitely need to continue having as well. I get the piece where you're going to detect this. All right. So um, re- make my heart stop fluttering so much about the detection and response side. We run a security operations center here. It's really cool when I can see people knocking on the door, right? And people pay me to do that. But people pay me more to be able to respond to when somebody actually knocks the door down and now they're inside my building or they're inside of my computer system.
Yeah.
How about the response side of this as well? Can you maybe, I heard you mention, that you have some partnerships with that as well. So is that something you work with other companies to do?
Yes. So, you know, first of all, responding to the operator, the pilot, is something that anybody can do at this point, right?
Yep.
If you know, you call the police, if you got security guards, you can do that. Um, Now, mitigation, outside of like 5 federal agencies, was, you know, zero. Before
Hmm.
before January of this year. Now, with the passage of the new National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA that happened in January, there was additional language in there that formed a kind of a pilot program called Safer Skies. And
Hmm.
in that pilot program, it says that local law enforcement, state, local, tribal law enforcement can have the authority to mitigate drones once they've gone through a training program run by,
Mm.
I think it's primarily the FBI. So, and this has been, they've been changing this to kind of get ready for, the FIFA World Cup events that are taking place
Yep.
now. So they know that they didn't have the resources to do it on just on a federal level, but they needed to give more capability into the hands of the local law enforcement. And so now, after that training, they can have the authority to mitigate drones. So that's a big change. Uh, and with that, kind of most of the drones that are flying around there are not at this time right now here are not fiber optic drones.
Right.
They're standard commercial off the shelf drones that people are buying and then flying into areas to get a good you know YouTube video shot. And what doing stuff they shouldn't be doing, but they're more of the careless and the
They're
clueless.
not exactly. They're not criminals. There's no criminal intent. I'm not worried about those guys. It's the guys who slapped the C4 on the drone that worries me. Right.
Right, and like I mean, there was just a plot intercepted just this last week that came from the news about a group that were planning to load up explosives onto drones and fly it into the White House area during the big wrestling
Yep. UFC. Yep.
MMA match at the
Yep.
White House this last Sunday, and it was intercepted by the FBI. Sounded like they weren't too well prepared to actually do that, but obviously people are thinking of it, and if they do have that real type of intent, obviously they could be done. I mean, it's not too hard, as you can see, to accomplish that if you can get hold of the materials.
Right. Right. And maybe not as easy to get hold of here in the United States, but they can be. C4 is probably not too hard to get a hold of. Dynamite's not too hard to get a hold of, I'm sure. Um, you know, it sounds to me like the detection piece. This is a very classic, just like our security operations center, or very similar to our security operations center. We love having eyes on glass. That's one of the things we say, and we have 24/7 eyes on glass. But we really need to be able to have that response side, and if I was thinking that I was a critical infrastructure component, I won't say which one, let's just say I'm a critical infrastructure component, I would want to have the ability to respond if I saw a threat coming my way. Is that something you see that's in the legislation at all, or is that something they can do today as well?
So there is a new bill sponsored by Tom Cotton from Arkansas, who's a senator, that is called the Critical Infrastructure Airspace Defense Act. That's a bit of a mouthful,
Right.
but in that bill is the language to say, let's allow not just local law enforcement, but also critical infrastructure operators to be able to mitigate drones. So it's in process. You know, this is a new bill. It's still going through, it's still going through the process.
Yeah.
I don't have any idea if it's going to really make it through, but at least it's a real bill. It's being promoted, and in essence, that would now say, okay, critical infrastructure operators, and I think this would be, I think, because data centers are now just as critical as the
Oh, yes.
substation that powers it. I mean, you think about, okay, if a data center goes down, all the things that stop working. I mean, it's
Yes.
critical. So I think I think it's broad enough to cover just more than just the power generation, but also, I think it would be covering airports, data centers, water utilities, anything that, is required to keep our civilization operating.
I mean, I think, and I'd love to get your perspective on this. What we have seen the last few years, has basically changed warfare, right? The
Yeah.
latest tool, has been, drones, and people have been, leveraging them to do devastating damage on the battlefield. Whether it's these big long range drones, and you can build these things for nothing, $5,000 or $50,000. When you get the larger drones, what's to say that somebody couldn't build something like that and then start launching them in a wave, right? So, what kind of challenges do you see, not only from a detection standpoint, but what challenges do you see in kind of fighting this new battlefield? Can
Yeah.
AI help us, as well? I guess is where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I mean, and we're actively working on that with other companies, weapon systems. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, because if you think about it, if it's a fiber optically guided drone or a video AI guided drone, because
Mm-hmm.
that's the
Mm-hmm.
other thing is you don't need GPS, um, and you don't need any communication. So these autonomously running video AI driven drones are real now. Uh,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and they're just using AI to analyze, okay, by waypoints where they're at. And so again, it's another technology that you can't just jam. You can't jam their GPS, and so you need something else. And really, we go into what the military likes to say, kinetics. You got to shoot it down somehow, whether that's a laser or a shotgun or a minigun or something, a net. You got to shoot it down. Now, if you're thinking swarms, now, and that's the way that things are going, is it's not just if there's someone serious, it's not just one. It's not just one drone at a time. It's 5 drones, 10 drones,
Correct. Yes.
and they all come in
Different
simultaneously
directions, from different directions and all
from
that as
different
well. So,
directions. Absolutely.
mm-hmm.
So that's why we've been working on this new radar, this compact holographic 3D radar, because it's a whole different approach to the technology. Where let's see, I'm going to share this. I'm going to share this with you
Okay.
here. It kind of give you the sense is that the kind of the legacy style radars are using these electronically scanned arrays, which are like a flashlight, and they're scanning the beam
Mm-hmm.
back and forth across the sky. Um, Now, if you've got 180 spots, kind of like pixels that you got to scan, then and it takes you 10 milliseconds per spot. It takes you 1.8 seconds to scan the full volume of space. And if you got a drone that's moving fast, say at 100 miles per hour is roughly just under 50 meters per second, which is not unheard of, then you know in that 2 seconds it's moved 100 meters. That's not fast enough to be able to cue a weapon system. So we've taken a different approach where we're using this holographic method where we're illuminating the full volume of space 100% of the time, then capturing the reflection, all the data coming back from that illumination for 56 milliseconds. And then we can identify up to 50 different targets every frame, for every shot or every capture, and then we feed that information over to the weapon system. So that's happening now. Now we're still it's still development stages, but it's moving very rapidly and it is getting to reality very quickly.
So what do you see? I'm going to take you back to the kind of the security operations center for me. That's kind of where it sounds to me like what you guys have is very similar to what we do with our sensors, right? One of our biggest problems that we have is the amount of noise in the system. Do you guys see a lot of noise in this, or is it really like birds as an example? With this method, can you distinguish the speed versus a drone versus kind of a, I don't know what you call it, a gaggle of geese flying in the air.
Yeah, a flock of birds coming in.
There you
Yes,
go.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there are some characteristics between birds. I mean, if you're just using the radar alone,
Hmm.
there is what's called a micro Doppler effect off of the rotation of the blades if it's
Ah.
close
Okay.
enough.
Hmm.
And that happens at shorter ranges where you get enough return off of these little propellers that you can see
Right.
kind of a pattern coming
Yeah.
off of that because we measure the velocity and we can see the velocity of those propellers, and that's a nice signature you can pull out. So there's that thing.
Cool.
But also if they're
So the
attack
dot's not the dot itself is not just a dot. You're gathering a whole bunch of information about that individual dot, and you can make some determinations about the information that you're gathering from it as well. That's
yeah,
cool.
it's a signature
Right.
that's
Hmm.
unique. Now you think about it. What if it's a fixed wing? You know, what's it
Hmm.
instead of a rotor? Like a quadcopter,
Yep.
or a six, copter thing, but rather a fixed wing, still typically will have a blade. It
You'll be
just
able to
makes it.
see that from the back side because you look at the Iranian drones. They have a propeller on the back, and it's just pushing them forward.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I could see
it's
that being a
harder.
major difference. Mhm.
Yeah, it's harder if it's on the back and it's kind of covered up by the body. It's a little bit harder, but then you know the speed. Those are going at 120 miles per hour. Birds
Right.
aren't going 120 miles per hour.
No, there you go. Okay.
So we can differentiate by velocity, one, and then we also do things like use video analytics as well for the slower moving ones that might be at longer ranges here, and that's part of uh, our platform. Is from the sensor is kind of like the C2, the common operational picture type thing at a site
Hmm.
level. Is we have this software we call Networked IO, which is a command and control software that also has video AI built into it. Coming back to your point earlier, so where do we
Oh,
see AI in this? And we see AI in this all over the place. I
oh
mean,
yeah. Hmm.
because you've got to make these determinations fast. You have to they kind of reduce the load on the operator because there's birds, there's clutter, there's things moving around, there's vehicles, and
Hmm.
you've got to make it such that the operator isn't overwhelmed by all of this data. And AI is being used by ourselves and others to help differentiate between a real target or not.
Right.
You know, you still want to keep a human in the loop, but still you use the AI as a tool to help classify and reduce the workload on the operator.
Okay. Cool. So what do you see? I got two last questions for you, and then I have a few kind of personal questions. But the two last questions are, what do you see as the biggest challenges, for the adoption of this type of technology? And the second is, how do you get your funding? Do you do them for BAAs or do you go through cyber grants and stuff like that as well? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the biggest challenges for any new technology is first and foremost education.
Hmm.
Getting people comfortable with what the technology does, what does it do, and and helping them understand where does it apply, where doesn't apply, what to use. Because as with a new technology adoption is primarily limited to people's you know level of comfortability with that technology. Um,
Correct.
when you know when CCTV cameras first came out, it took a while for people to get comfortable with the thought of having all these cameras around their
Hmm.
sites,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it took some time. Um,
Yep.
we're in the kind of the same mode for both ground as well as air type, wide area surveillance. Um, you know, we we started this whole kind of commercial security radar business before Spotter. There wasn't, radar was not being used for commercial security. We were the first ones, and
Hmm.
that was 17 years ago. Getting that started, and now it's starting to go more mainstream. Um, counter counter drone type technology is still quite in its infancy. Obviously some things are starting to roll out, but like for instance, there's very few because we know we're there. Is that there's when you look at all the substations across the United States and all the data centers, uh, there's not that many of them that are actually having some sort of counter drone, uh, even just detection on their sites. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing. And then there's the regulation because most of them, like most security systems, people don't do it until it's been broken into. Been a
Yep.
security incident, and then they'll
Hmm.
buy, or
Yep.
if there's regulation. Okay,
Yep.
that's what happens. So, um, and and fortunately,
And
in the United
I could
States,
see the
there hasn't been one.
hesitancy. I could actually see the hesitancy of organizations really even understanding, or maybe it's the lack of imagination, because we haven't felt it. But this to me seems like a huge problem. potential problem, I should say, here in the United States.
Well, and people don't really understand, how big of a problem it is because, you know, they don't have this type of data. I mean, if this is just a this is just a normal location, and
Right.
there's drone flights like this guy right here, flying over this utility.
Hmm.
This is the water. This is the water utility that feeds our city here, and this guy's
Yeah.
flying off over from this neighborhood, and he's flying his drones over the water utility plant.
Which you're not supposed to do anyway, but that's
You're
okay.
not supposed to do that, but they're doing it, and they probably never even knew it happened
Yeah.
because
Yeah. I mean, they could be, right? Could be, but I've been doing cybersecurity for 40 years, and when it looks like a duck, smells like a duck, it's probably a duck.
yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, yeah, so I, I see that, and I see that as being a big hurdle to overcome until it's not, and that's the part that worries me. Right? Is the or not side. What's gonna be the event that makes people think about this? So the second part of that question, I'm really curious if you are leveraging cyber grants or if you're using more BAAs, or are you really selling more into the commercial market then in this space?
Yeah, we sell to both. So our business is primarily kind of like military tactical systems, and then our kind of
Oh,
industrial critical infrastructure. On the military side, yeah, we've done like we've done a couple cybers over the years. Uh, we do most of our development using internal funding. Uh,
okay.
because we can do it a lot faster and there's a lot less
Yep.
strings attached. Uh,
Yep.
so we're kind of more, what do we say, commercial off the shelf type of thing
Hmm.
because we're dual
Okay.
use technology. So we use
Hmm.
the revenue and our cash that's generated from our business, and we pour it into developing these new technologies. And so we bid into a lot of these commercial infrastructure projects as they put in new data centers or they're doing a refit at a substation. So that's the other part of our business. And then on the military side, we typically work with a prime contractor that is doing some sort of
Okay.
mission or
Hmm.
mission based or like base defense.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. I truly appreciate that. Fascinating conversation. I actually was a little worried going into this, but I really, like I said, I'm a drone pilot myself, and security operations and sensors is what we do for a living here. So it really is easy for me to understand. It should hopefully be easy to understand for our guests who watch this as well. So the last two questions I said are somewhat personal, but not really. You know, have you read a book recently that you really have enjoyed, or a book that you recommend to anybody out there in the audience?
Well, I mean, I just finish up. A lot of times I'll listen to audiobooks when I'm
Me too.
exercising. I go running
Hmm.
in the mornings, or once in a while I go to the gym, and I listen to uh, to different books. That's the only time I get to actually listen to something that's not necessarily related directly to the business.
Yep.
And so I just recently finished a biography on Thomas Edison,
Ah.
and it was very fascinating. Obviously, his life and kind of his approach to life and business, and how many different companies he was involved in, and how many thousands, almost 2,000 different patents that he filed
Hmm.
across all kind of different domains. Very fascinating.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, I have I read lots of business books and science fiction. The most recent business book that I listened to was one called Four Levers. And it's really about negotiating contracts, and
Mm.
very interesting, very fascinating. It gave me a different perspective on how to negotiate contracts with tough customers. So, the next question: how about a TV or a movie that you've recently liked that you would suggest as well?
Well, I watched a documentary on the Rockefellers
Okay.
last night. uh,
Yeah.
so I guess I'm not like a real big, you know, TV watcher, I would say. I tend to kind of drift more to the kind of the documentary type styles. So I guess, nothing too interesting on that sense.
Okay. All right. So for me, I've been I just started watching a show called For All Mankind. It's on Apple TV. It's really interesting. It's a like a different history. What if scenario if say the Russians landed on the moon
Oh
before
yeah.
we did? It's really fascinating and it's very scientific. So I find it very good. I truly appreciate it. Any last words from yourself?
Well,
Any questions for me?
yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of your, kind of your typical audience, I know we're kind of hitting kind of our end of our time here, but if we were going to do this again, what would be the interesting topics that we should look at for the future?
So, a good follow on is compliance.
Mm,
I mean, you guys are software and you're hardware, but this is a common operating picture that I'm looking at, right?
yeah,
And does that common operating picture integrate into anybody else's common operating picture? But compliance standards, what do you do from a security perspective, from a compliance perspective? That'd be a very interesting topic to explore. And for me, this is very fascinating. I'm not gonna lie, it's very fascinating. I'm very intrigued by what you do here, and like I said, I can draw so many parallels to what we do, um, because we do detection and response, and that's
hmm,
really what you're talking about here is detection and response. It's just more physical, but you
yes,
need the software. Still need the software to be able to do the analysis on it to whether or not you want to do some kind of response. The response side is, I think, is something that I would love to explore. I'm not sure you could come up with the answers, or I couldn't come up with the answers because most of it's going to be legal, right? And what you can actually do because we can't respond in a way that's going to be like offensive, right?
yes,
And
yeah.
alls I can envision is things that are offensive on the drone side, on the defense.
Well,
So
and I think that's where, over the next year, some of the major developments are going to be on that side, on the mitigation, on the
yes,
response side. I mean,
yep.
people are realizing, a major drone event in the United States
Oh,
really
that
hasn't happened yet.
No,
If you
it
think about
hasn't. And I think once that does, that's when we're going to see, it's something really, really, come up really fast on us from a legal perspective. And I tell you what we should do is we should try to schedule something not after an event like that, but if you see any kind of legal ramifications, changing, like the Tom Cotton bill, if it gets
it. Yeah,
further down the path, maybe we can do some analysis and discussion on that as well because I do see this as a threat. It's a major threat. It's a major threat on data centers, especially now that we're going so centralized cloud. Everything. I used to have a data center behind my security operations center. We had about 18 different racks that was stacked from top to bottom with computer systems. They're all in the cloud now. They're
yeah,
all in the
yeah,
cloud, and they're all on somebody else's data center, and they're all on somebody else's computer system. I mean, we saw what happened in the Middle East during this Iran conflict, right? They took out a couple data centers there in the Middle East, and now they're I don't know if they're still up yet, right? Um, so we just need to think about that and expand that mindset and that threat to here in the United States as well. So I wouldn't mind exploring that. I wouldn't lie. That would be pretty interesting to do. So maybe work with Caitlin and we can see if we can get you back on and we can talk, maybe explore a little bit in that as well. So
absolutely. I mean, because I
yep.
think it's now, and a lot of times we see that kind of our systems, integrate or even being kind of managed by the IT departments because the IT departments, this is more technical. And so the IT is very much involved with, okay,
It's
how does
just
this
log
all
data to
integrate?
me, right? Yeah, no, it's just log data, right?
Yeah,
So it's just
yeah,
what do you do? What do you do with that log data? So I wouldn't mind exploring that with you as well. Is the data, what does it look like and stuff like that? So
yeah.
maybe we
And
can
how
get a
does
little more
it
technical.
integrate into the kind of the common, if you think about it, the common operational picture that's
Yes.
expanded, not just the cybersecurity, but then also how do you monitor the physical security of your perimeters? It's just a
Yep.
different perimeter and a different,
I was just
dimension.
having this conversation on the physical side with another one of my guests a couple weeks ago, And we didn't get too far on it because I'm not a physical security expert. So I couldn't speak to it too far. He was not a security expert as well, so he struggled with it a bit as well. So we kind of stopped the conversation and we moved on to areas that we knew better, you know. But it would be an interesting topic. Maybe we could pull in a physical security guy or person, you know, in for that conversation as well. So, well, we are up against our limit, I time limit. I truly appreciate your time today. It was a fantastic conversation, and as always, you may not find, I may not be the one behind the shield discussion, but you're always going to find somebody behind the shield. Thank you very much for your time, and peace out.